She sat in the corner of the alien slave market with her head down, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her skin was gray and cracked, her hair stuck together in hard, dirty clumps, and the smell around her made even the traders take a step back. No one knew her name. No one cared to ask. She had been there for many days, maybe weeks, maybe more. No one wanted to buy her, not even for free. Some laughed when they passed by, some made jokes, calling her cursed or diseased. Some children pointed and ran away in fear. She did not speak. She did not move. She just stayed there quiet, as if waiting for the world to end. The marketplace was loud with shouting and bargaining. Aliens of many shapes and colors moved from stall to stall, buying and selling. Slaves of all kinds. Some were strong, some were skilled, some were beautiful and clean, but not her. She was the forgotten one. The one no one touched because of her smell, because of the dirt and filth that covered her whole body. She had no chains anymore because she never ran. They knew she would not go anywhere then. One day, a human man walked through the crowd. His name was Cade. He wore simple clothes. His eyes were sharp but kind. He was not there to buy anyone. He had come for supplies, but something pulled him toward the corner. He smelled it first, a foul, rotten odor worse than anything in the market, but he followed it. He saw her sitting alone, and something in her eyes stopped him. They were not just sad, they were empty, like someone who had already died inside. Cade stood still for a moment, then walked closer. The other traders stared in shock. One of them shouted, "Don't go near her, human. She's poison." But Cade ignored them. He came closer, and the smell grew stronger. But he did not cover his nose. He looked at the girl. She looked up for the first time. Her eyes met his. She did not beg. She did not speak. Her face showed no hope, only confusion. He knelt in front of her and asked, "What's your name?" She said nothing. He looked around and asked, "How much for this one?" The trader laughed and said, "She's worthless. You can take her for a single credit, or better yet, just take her away. She scares the customers." Cade reached into his pocket, took out a single credit, and placed it in the trader's hand. The trader chuckled and walked away, shaking his head, saying, "Crazy human." Everyone watched as Cade took off his cloak and slowly wrapped it around the girl. She flinched at first, her body shaking, but then she let him cover her. He lifted her in his arms. She was light, like she had not eaten in days. The smell was terrible, but Cade did not care. The crowd parted as he walked through. Some held their breath. Others whispered. One alien woman said, "Maybe he's lost his mind. Maybe he's trying to make a show." But Cade did not look at them. He kept walking until he reached his ship inside. He placed her on a soft bed. She had never touched anything soft before. Her hands gripped the blanket tightly, like it might vanish. She looked at him with wide eyes, still silent, still unsure. Cade turned on the shower in the small washing room. Steam filled the air. He walked back and gently helped her up. She resisted at first, her eyes full of panic, but he spoke in a calm voice, saying, "It's okay. It's just water. No one will hurt you." Here he led her to the water and placed her hand under the stream. She pulled back quickly, then slowly reached out again. The warmth surprised her. It did not burn, it did not freeze, it just felt strange. Cade picked up a cloth and gently wiped her arm. She froze but did not run. He washed her with care, not like cleaning a thing, but like healing a wound. The dirt came off slowly, layer by layer. The smell began to fade under the steam, and Soapy saw her real skin for the first time, not gray, but soft, pale, with scars hidden under grime. Her hair had color, her face had shape. She looked at herself in the mirror and did not know who she was. Cade gave her clean clothes and stepped outside. To give her space, she dressed slowly, her hands shaking. She walked out of the washing room and saw food waiting on the table, hot and fresh. She looked at Cade and finally asked one word, "Why?" And Cade smiled and said, "Because you are not trash, you are someone who deserves to be clean, warm, and free." The water had stopped, but her thoughts did not. Her fingers still felt The warmth of it, her skin no longer burned from the shame that had lived on her body for so long. She stood near the doorway of the small room wearing clean clothes, her hair still wet, her eyes filled with a question she had never dared to ask before. Cade sat at the table, watching her without pressure, without fear. His plate of food untouched, he nodded toward the chair across from him and waited. Her legs were weak, but she moved forward slowly, like a new creature learning how to walk for the first time. She sat and looked at the bowl in front of her. The smell was rich and unfamiliar. It made her stomach twist. But not in pain and hunger. He handed her a spoon. She looked at it, confused, and then copied him. He scooped a bite and ate. She followed him slowly and tasted real food. Her eyes widened, her hands shook, but she kept eating faster and faster until the bowl was empty. Cade smiled and pushed another bowl toward her. She hesitated, then ate again. Her face changed. Something inside her cracked, and light began to come through. After the meal, she leaned back against the chair and whispered the same word again. Why? Her voice was dry, but no longer broken. Cade stood and said, "I will show you." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small screen, pressing a button. The room dimmed, and the screen lit up, showing stars moving slowly in the black sky. He pointed to a glowing dot and said, "That is my home. It is called Earth. I was born there. I grew up with stories of kindness and courage. I came here to trade, not to rescue. But when I saw you, I could not walk away. Something in your eyes reminded me of someone I lost long ago." She listened, but did not speak. He continued, "You were not supposed to live like that. No one is. You are not a slave, not anymore." She looked down and said, "I do not even have a name." Cade looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Let me give you one." He walked to a drawer and pulled out an old book. He opened it gently and showed her a page with drawings and words. He pointed to a name and said, "This was my sister's name before she passed away. Her name was Lyra. It means light." The girl looked at the page, then at him, and said, "Lyra." She touched her chest and repeated, "Lyra. I am Lyra." Cade nodded and said, "Yes, you are." She looked at her hands, clean now, and whispered again, "Lyra." That night, she slept in a real bed for the first time, her body still trembling from new comfort. She curled under the blanket and listened to the soft hum of the ship. Her dreams were filled with water and stars. Cade sat outside in the pilot seat, looking at the market reports and listening to background noise. He heard whispers in the dark, voices talking about the strange human who picked up the cursed girl. One voice said, "Maybe he wants to sell her later." Another said, "Maybe he is just lonely." But Cade ignored them. He knew what he had seen. He knew pain when it lived in someone's eyes, and he knew Lyra deserved better. Next morning, she woke up before him and walked around the small ship, her feet bare, her steps soft. She touched the walls like they were made of air. She found a small window and saw planets outside. Her heart beat faster than ever before. She whispered her name again, Lyra. Cade entered the room, holding 2 cups. He gave her one and said, "It is called tea." She took a sip and made a face. He laughed and said, "Not everyone likes it." She smiled just a little. Suddenly, the ship beeped, a warning light flashing on the screen. Cade looked and frowned. Someone had sent a message. It was a trade official saying there was a complaint about stolen property. He looked at Lyra and said, "Stay inside, I will handle this." She nodded, her hands gripping the warm cup. Cade landed the ship at a nearby dock. A tall alien stood, waiting, eyes full of anger. He shouted, "You took what was not yours. She was not on the list for purchase. You broke the law." Cade showed the credit slip and said, "I paid for her. She was offered. She was taken, fair and legal." Alien hissed, "She is dangerous. She smells of chemicals and disease. She brings shame to the market." Cade stepped closer and said, "She is clean now and she is under my care." The alien stared, then spat on the ground and said, "You will regret this, human. She has marked her smell is not natural." Cade raised an eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean?" But the alien had already turned and walked away. He returned to the ship and found Lyra sitting quietly, her eyes full of fear. He sat beside her and said, "Nothing will hurt you, not while I am here." She looked at him and said, "Thank you." And he replied, "No need for thanks, just live." Lyra stood in front of the mirror again, her fingers slowly tracing the edge of the sink. The steam from the warm shower still danced in the air around her. Her reflection was not what she remembered. Her skin no longer looked like stone, her cheeks no longer hollow, her eyes held questions and something else, something like a small, forgotten flame. She turned the water on again, letting the warmth run over her hands. She liked the way it felt. She stepped into the shower without fear this time, and let the water fall over her head. She stayed there, eyes closed, arms wide, letting the stream carry the weight away. She stayed until the air turned cool and her skin wrinkled with softness. Cade waited outside the door, sitting at the table, lost in thought, his fingers tapping slowly on the metal surface of the cup. He had cleaned ships before, he had fought battles and crossed black space alone, but nothing had prepared him for the way her silence made him listen to his own thoughts. When she came out, her hair was wrapped in a towel, her face was calm, her steps more steady. She sat beside him without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes looked at his face and then around the small ship. She asked softly, "Can we fly somewhere far?" He looked at her and asked how far. She paused and said, "Somewhere I do not smell like," before he nodded and stood up, tapping a few buttons on the ship panel. The engines hummed and the stars outside began to shift. He set the ship to glide through empty space, far from trade lanes, far from crowds and eyes. For the first time, Lyra felt safe, not just from chains or slavers, but from the stares, from the disgust, from the words that burned more than wounds. She asked if he had always lived alone. He nodded and said, "I had friends once, but time moves people apart." She did not reply, only nodded slowly, her fingers playing with the hem of her sleeve. She spoke again and said, "I remember when I was small, there were other children, but they would not come near me. One boy threw rocks, another girl called me Death Girl. I tried to play once, but they told my mother to take me away. So she left me alone in a dark room. I stayed there for many days until traders came and sold me for metal parts." Cade listened without interrupting, his hands resting on the table, his jaw tight. She continued, "Sometimes I forget how many hands owned me, how many cages I saw, how many times I was washed, not to clean me, but to make sure I would not spread disease. But no one ever really cleaned me until now." She looked at her hands and whispered, "I thought I was the smell. I thought I was the dirt. I thought I was meant to be thrown away." Cade stood and walked over to a small shelf. He pulled out a box, opened it, and showed her a tiny glowing plant. Its leaves moved slowly, glowing blue. He said, "This is called hope flower. It grows in places others do not look. You give it water, light, and time, and it glows." She reached out and touched the leaf gently, her eyes wide in wonder. He said, "You are like this flower. You only needed care." She nodded, tears slowly building in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Later that evening, Cade gave her a datapad and said, "If you want, you can learn things here." She looked at the screen, confused. He showed her how to read basic words, how to speak them, how to tap and scroll. Her fingers were clumsy, but she learned fast. She practiced reading simple words out loud. Chair, table, ship, sky. She paused at one word, freedom. She looked at him and asked, "What is freedom?" He said, "It is when you belong only to yourself." That night, she sat near the window, watching stars blink across the sky. She did not sleep. Instead, she wrote her name on a small paper again and again. Lyra, Lyra, Leah. Suddenly, the ship lights dimmed, and a warning appeared on the screen. Cade rushed to the panel and tapped quickly, his face serious. Lyra walked over and asked, "What is wrong?" He said, "There's a ship following us. No ID, no signal." She asked, "Are they coming for me?" He said, "I do not know, but I will not let them take you." He handed her a small bag and said, "If I tell you to hide, you hide." She nodded, her body shaking, but her feet stayed still. She did. Not run, she did not scream. She just stood near him like a shadow ready to move if needed. Cade turned the ship lights off and changed course, hoping to lose the unknown follower behind. Then, the shadow ship blinked once, then vanished into dark space. The ship flew quietly through the stars, the hum of the engine. Low and soft inside the cabin, Lyra sat on the floor cross-legged, her eyes fixed on the glowing plant Cade had given her. Her fingers gently touched the leaves, watching them sway with the rhythm of the engine. It was the first time she had something of her own, something not taken, something not forced. Cade watched her from the pilot's seat, his eyes heavy with thought. He had changed the ship's ID and masked its trail, hoping to lose the strange vessel that had followed them earlier. The system showed no sign of pursuit now, but he remained alert, just in case. Lyra looked up at him and asked what if they come back. He turned his head and replied, "Then we run again, or fight if we must." She nodded slowly, then stood and walked toward the kitchen area where she began preparing the drink. He had shown her the day before her movements, still learning, still unsure, but more confident than before. As the tea brewed, she asked, "Can I tell you something?" He replied, "Always." She took a deep breath and sat at the table, her voice low and steady. "The first time I was hurt, I was 4 years old. My mother screamed when she held me," she said. "I smelled wrong. She tried to wash me with acid, thinking it would remove the curse, but it burned me instead." Cade clenched his fists under the table, but said nothing. He knew she needed to speak. She continued, "The doctors said I was born in a chemical zone, a place filled with waste from an old lab. The air was poisoned, and I came out wrong. My skin, my smell, everything. The village elder said I was touched by spirits and ordered my family to abandon me. Left me outside in the rain. A scavenger found me and sold me to a trader, the first of many. I do not remember all their names, but I remember their cages, some cold, some dark, some full of other children who cried at night. I did not cry. I learned not to." She paused and looked at him, her eyes steady now. "When I grew older, they tried to make me useful. I was sent to clean machines, but the workers said I made the place smell, so they put me back in the cage. No one spoke to me. No one touched me." Cade asked, "Did anyone ever help?" Her hands tightened around the cup. "One man once, an old mechanic. He gave me a small comb and said, maybe it will help, but then he was gone the next day, taken away by guards." She opened her hand, revealing a tiny broken comb, its teeth bent and worn. "I kept it all this time, even when they searched me, even when they beat me. I hid it in my hair. I told myself, if I still have this, I still have me." Cade stood and walked to her side, kneeling slowly. He took the comb from her hand and said, "Then, this is not just a comb. It is your memory, your strength." She looked down, tears falling without sound. He let them fall without comment. He understood pain without needing words. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you think I was cursed?" He shook his head and replied, "No. I think you were born in the wrong place at the wrong time, but now you are here with me, and I will not let the past define you." Silence that followed was heavy but peaceful. Later that day, Cade showed her how to scan the stars. He explained the charts and how to track planets. She listened closely, asking questions, learning the names of constellations and nebulae. She liked the sound of them, each one like a dream she had never been allowed to have. Suddenly a new signal blinked on the screen. Not a threat, not an enemy, but a broadcast from the trade network. News and messages flashed across it. One image froze. Them both. It was Lyra, her old self, dirty, broken, chained to a photo taken at the market before. Cade had found her below it, a message offering a reward for her capture labeled as infected and dangerous. Cade cursed under his breath and shut off the signal. He turned to her and said, "They are trying to take you back." She nodded slowly, but her face held no fear, only resolve. "They will not," she said firmly. "I am not going back. I am not a slave." He looked at her with pride and said, "Then we keep flying. We find a place where no one knows your scent, only your names." Smiled and whispered, "My name is Lyra," and for the first time in her life, she believed it. The sky outside turned deep blue as the ship drifted near the edge of a quiet system far from the main route's Cade. Checked the sensors again, confirming they were alone for now, but his thoughts were not calm. His eyes kept looking at the screen. Where her image had appeared, the bounty notice still fresh in his mind, inside the ship. Lyra sat with the datapad reading slowly, her fingers moving across the words. She whispered them, one by one, repeating each line until it made sense. Her mind was growing, her voice getting stronger, her past still close, but no longer controlling. She asked Cade, "What if someone finds us again?" he said. "Then we move again, or we fight if needed," she asked. "What if I fight?" To his hands, paused, and he turned to look at her. Her face was firm, her eyes steady. He said, "We train tomorrow." She smiled that night. Cade could not sleep. The stars outside blinked calmly, but his mind was restless. Memories of battles returned, faces of people he had lost before haunted him. He stood near the window, sipping his tea, when the alarm beeped once, then twice. Someone was outside, not close, but not far. A small ship had entered the system. Cade tapped the screen. It had no trade tag, no broadcast signal, but the design looked familiar, too familiar. His heart sank as he remembered the face of a traitor, the one who had handed Lyra to him that day at the market. Cade woke Lyra with a soft knock. She opened the door. Without fear, he said, "Get dressed, stay near me." She nodded. They stood in the command room watching the screen as the ship came closer. It stopped just out of range, then sent a voice message crackling through the speaker. "No, you have her, human. I know what she is worth. She belongs to the pit. Not with you. Give her back and I might let you live." Lyra's hands clenched into fists, her jaw tight, her eyes staring at the screen as if she could burn it. Cade looked at her and asked, "What do you want me to do?" She said, "Open the channel. I want to speak." He pressed the button. Her voice came through, cold and clear. "I am not property. I do not belong to anyone. I am Lyra, and I will not go back there." Was silence, then laughter from the speaker. "Weak words from a weak thing. You smell like death. You bring rot to every ship you touch." Cade replied, "I cleaned her. I fed her. I stood by her, and what I saw was not rot, but strength. You threw away something you never understood." The traitor snapped, "I will take her back or burn you both. Your name means nothing in this galaxy." Cade said, "Then come and try." He ended the call and locked the ship's shields. The traitor's vessel moved into firing range, but stopped when a new signal appeared from behind another ship, bigger, armed, carrying the mark of the neutral guild. They hailed both ships with a command: stand down or face removal from the system. Trade law applies to all claims, must be proven by records and evidence. Traitor hesitated, then sent a file trying to show Lyra as stolen property, but the guild officer responded, "The document is invalid." She was offered for a single credit and accepted under open terms. The traitor tried again, claiming she was infected with dangerous chemicals. The guild requested a scan. Cade allowed it. Lyra stood still as the beam passed over her body. The result was clear: no infection, no danger, no threat. The traitor's voice returned, full of rage, "This is not over, human." Guild replied, "It is over here. Leave now or face docking ban in 6 systems." The traitor's ship turned and vanished into the dark. Cade let out a breath he had held for too long. Lyra looked at him and said, "I was not afraid." He smiled and said, "I know, leader." They sat in the quiet room. Lyra held the comb in one hand, the datapad in the other. She read the word courage and asked, "What does it really mean?" Cade said, "It means doing what is right, even when you are scared." She nodded and said, "Then today I had courage." He agreed and added, "And tomorrow we'll have more." They watched the stars through the window, no longer as escape, but as freedom. Lyra whispered to herself, "I am not the smell. I am not the cage. I am Lyra, and I belong to no one." The stars outside glowed like scattered fireflies across the endless sky. The ship floated near a quiet moon where Cade had decided to rest for repairs. The battle may not have happened, but the stress had left the systems strained. The engines needed cooling, and the shields needed a reset. Inside the ship, Lyra was training her feet, moving across the floor with slow, careful steps, her arms copying the moves Cade had shown her earlier, her breath steady, her eyes focused. She was not just learning to fight, she was learning to stand. Cade watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, his face calm. He remembered when he first saw her trembling in that cage, and now she moved like she belonged on her own feet. She asked, "Am I doing it right?" He nodded and said, "Better than most." They shared food after the session. Lyra cooked the meal with her own hands, adding spice too much, maybe, but she laughed at the face Cade made when he tasted it. He said it was strong. She said, "Like me now." Just as the day felt like peace, the signal light blinked again. This time, it was not a trader or a bounty hunter. It was a legal notice from the Central Trade Hub. Someone had filed a formal challenge claiming Cade had stolen genetically protected property. The charge was not just serious, it was dangerous. Cade opened the file and read the claim. It said Lyra was not a free being, but a product of a failed experiment, marked for termination by the lab that created her. The signature was hidden, but the wording was clear. They wanted her erased, not returned. Lyra stood behind him, silent for a long time, then said, "They want me dead because I lived." He looked at her and said, "Then we make them hear your voice." He sent a reply message requesting a hearing with the Trade Council, the only place where such claims could be argued by law. It was risky, because if they lost, she would be taken. But if they won, she would be declared a full person under galactic protection. Council agreed to a hearing and summoned both parties to a nearby station. Cade guided the ship toward the coordinates while Lyra sat in silence, her comb in one hand, her datapad in the other. She was not afraid, just ready. When they landed, the air was heavy with attention. Eyes followed them as they walked through the halls. People whispered, "The girl smells clean now." The human brought her back. "She walks like she is someone." Inside the chamber, the council sat in silence. 5 members from different species, all dressed in long robes. The opposing side appeared as a screen with a voice modified and cold, declaring Lyra to be a chemical threat, a failure, a danger to all ships. Cade stood and spoke with fire in his voice. "She is not a mistake. She is not a thing. She is a person. I found her broken, and I saw what you all refused to see." Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "I was born in pain, but I survived. I was left in filth, but I rose. I was thrown away, but I am still here." The council listened, asked questions, read records, and examined scans. The silence in the room grew deep until finally one member asked Lyra, "What do you want?" She paused, looked at Cade, then at the council, and said, "I want my name. I want my voice. I want to be me, without fear, without chains." Members whispered among themselves. Then the lead counselor stood and said, "The claim is rejected. She is not property. She is not product. She is free." Gasps filled the room. Cheers followed from unexpected corners. People who had watched in silence now clapped as Lyra stood tall, her eyes wide with disbelief. The council added her name to the registry of protected beings, her identity confirmed, her rights secured, her voice recorded as proof. Outside the chamber, reporters waited. Flashes of cameras filled the air, but Lyra walked through them with grace, her shoulders high, her steps calm. She was no longer hiding back on the ship. She sat beside Cade, her hands open, her heart full. She asked, "What now?" He said, "Now you choose your own path." She smiled and said, "I want to see the stars, not to run, but to live." He nodded and said, "Then that is what we will do." The ship lifted from the station and flew into open space, no longer as a cage, no longer as an escape, but as a homeland. Lyra whispered to herself again and again, "I am free, I am real, I am Lyra." The stars moved slowly outside the window, glowing like rivers of light across the black sky. Lyra sat beside the pilot's seat, her face calm, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes watching space as if searching for something. Cade flew the ship in silence, letting her thoughts breathe in peace. They had left the council station with freedom in their hands and dignity in her name, but something still pulled at her chest. Something unspoken, something left behind. She turned to Cade and asked, "Do you believe that family can change?" He looked at her with quiet eyes and said, "I believe some do and some never will." She nodded slowly and whispered, "I want to find out." Cade knew what she meant before she even said it. He nodded and adjusted the course, setting the ship toward the outer rim, the place where her record said she was born, a planet called Vithera, surrounded by toxic clouds and forgotten ruins. Journey took 2 days through broken trade routes and abandoned stations, each one like a piece of her past falling away behind them. When they finally reached the planet, the ship's sensors blinked red, warning of chemical storms and unstable air. But Lyra stood at the door and said, "I need to walk on my own." Cade prepared a suit for her, and one for himself, thick enough to block the gas, but light enough to move. They stepped onto the surface together. The ground cracked under their feet. The wind carried dust that stung the skin. Lyra walked through the ruined village, her eyes scanning the broken homes, the burned signs, the empty streets. The scent of chemicals still lingered in the air, but it no longer owned her. It no longer defined her. They reached the place where the scanner showed life signs, a small group of people living underground, hidden from the world. Cade raised a signal flag and waited. After a while, a door opened from the ground and a guard stepped out with wide eyes. He asked, "Who are you?" Lyra stepped forward and said, "My name is Lyra. I was born here. I was left here. I have returned." The guard hesitated, then led them inside through tunnels filled with shadows and whispers. They reached a small chamber where an older woman sat. Her face aged, her eyes dull. Array froze for a moment, then walked forward. The woman looked up and said nothing at first. Then her lips trembled, and she said, "It cannot be. You are dead." Lyra replied, "No, I lived. I was thrown away, but I survived." Woman stood slowly, her legs weak, her hands shaking. She whispered, "I thought I saved you by letting you go. I thought the pain would end." Lyra said, "You saved yourself, not me. I lived in cages. I lived in dirt. I was hated for how I smelled, for how I looked, for what you left me with them." Woman fell to her knees, tears pouring down her cheeks. She said, "I was afraid. I did not know how to raise a child touched by poison. I did not know love." Lyra stood silent for a long time, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken comb. She placed it on the floor and said, "This is what I had. This is what kept me whole. Not your words, not your arms, but this piece of hope." The woman reached for it, but Lyra stopped her and said, "I am not here for comfort. I am here for truth." Behind them, others gathered, whispering among themselves. Old faces, some familiar, some not. Cade stepped forward and said, "She is no longer the girl you left. She is more than that now. She has a name. She has rights. She has power." One of the villagers asked, "How did she survive with that smell? How did no one kill her?" Cade replied, "Because someone saw her worth, because someone washed away the past and found gold beneath the ash." Lyra turned to the crowd and said, "The smell you feared kept me alive. It made you all run. It made others turn away, but it also brought him to me because he did not run, he did not hate. He saw a mesh, stepped back and said, I do not forgive you, not yet, but I forgive myself. I am not your shame, I am not your curse, I am Lyra's." They left the chamber in silence, Cade walking beside her, the wind outside still wild, but her steps strong. Back on the ship, she removed the suit and looked in the mirror again. This time, not to see dirt or pain, but to see strength and light. Cade placed the comb in a glass case and set it on the shelf beside the hope flower, two symbols of her journey, two pieces of her sauce. The ship rose into space. She whispered, I am the smell that saved a life. I am the girl no one wanted. I am the woman they will remember. Cade smiled and said, Welcome home, Lyra. For the first time, her heart believed it.